The horns have sounded, the lines are drawn. Thousands of men stand frozen in the dust, waiting for the signal to begin one of the most devastating wars in human history. But in the center of it all, the greatest warrior of his age completely breaks down. Arjuna drops his bow. His limbs tremble, and he refuses to fight. He is trapped in an impossible position. Across the battlefield stand his teachers, his mentors, and his own family. If he strikes them down, any kingdom he wins will be soaked in their blood. But if he walks away, he abandons his entire purpose in life. He reaches his breaking point. Looking at the 7th verse of this 2nd chapter, we see the exact moment Arjuna stops arguing with himself. He admits his mind is confused, and his natural courage has failed him. He turns to his charioteer, Krishna, and asks a single question. Looking at the English translation here, Arjuna says, "I am your disciple. Pray instruct me, who have put myself into your hands." This is a position we recognize. It is the moment where our own logic hits a wall. The intellect exhausts itself, and we realize that to move forward, we have to surrender our preconceived notions and ask for help. Krishna's response to this total psychological collapse is surprising. Sitting amidst 2 massive, tense armies, looking at his grieving friend, he smiles. He immediately points out a contradiction in Arjuna's thinking. This translation of verse 11 reads exactly, "You grieve over those who should not be grieved for, and yet speak like the learned. True wisdom doesn't weep for the living, nor the dead." Krishna introduces the concept of the Atman, the true eternal self. Looking at verse 12, he lays out reality. There was never a time when any of them did not exist, and there will never be a time when they cease to be. Physical death, then, is reframed entirely. Krishna compares the cycle of life and death to changing clothes. As we see here in verse 22, as a man shedding worn-out garments takes other new ones, likewise the embodied soul, casting off worn-out bodies, enters into others which are new. Our core is entirely immune to the physical world. It cannot be burned by fire, drowned by water, or pierced by any weapon. When we understand that the soul is permanent and indestructible, the intense existential dread of physical death loses its foundation. The grief Arjuna feels isn't based on ultimate reality, but on a temporary illusion. But realizing you have an immortal soul doesn't mean you get to ignore the physical world. Krishna brings Arjuna's focus right back to the dirt and noise of the battlefield. He reminds him of his swadharma, his specific personal duty. For a person born to the warrior class, fighting against injustice isn't a burden. Looking at verses 31 and 32, this kind of righteous conflict is described as an open door to heaven, an opportunity to fulfill one's deepest societal purpose. Walking away now would be a catastrophic failure of that duty. In verse 34, Krishna warns that abandoning the fight will result in undying infamy. For a person of honor, walking away from your highest responsibility is a fate much worse than dying in combat. To fight without accumulating bad karma, a new mindset is required. Here in verse 38, Krishna outlines the foundation of Karma Yoga. He instructs him to treat victory and defeat, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, exactly the same. This is the discipline of detached action. When you put all your focus into executing the right action and completely detach yourself from whether you win or lose, you eliminate the fear of failure. Knowing the soul is eternal isn't an excuse to sit out the hard parts of life. Instead, it provides the exact psychological armor needed to step onto the battlefield and execute your duties without hesitation. This detachment starts with how we process the physical world. Verse 14 points out that physical sensations like heat and cold, or emotional swings between pleasure and pain, are just fleeting contacts between our senses and their objects. They arrive and they vanish. These continuous fluctuations are the result of the gunas, the 3 modes of material nature that keep our lives in a constant state of chaotic motion. To find peace, a person has to find a constant, unwavering point of focus above that noise. Krishna tells Arjuna exactly how to do this in verse 45. He instructs him to become indifferent to worldly enjoyments and to rise above these endless pairs of opposites, establishing himself in a state of strict self-control. People who are constantly chasing their next desire have minds that branch out in a million directions, exhausting themselves for temporary rewards. But the wise person develops a resolute intellect, a singular, focused mind directed at a higher purpose. This creates a state known as Sthitaprajna, the person of steady wisdom. They act with extreme effectiveness in the material world, even while a storm rages around them, because their internal state remains completely untouched. The battlefield of Kurukshetra is a mirror for the conflicts we face every day. We are required to act, to uphold our responsibilities, and to push back against injustice. But to survive the friction of life, we have to release our desperate grip on the final outcome. Translating this philosophy into daily habits is the challenge of a lifetime. Exactly how an ordinary person trains their mind to act with this level of extreme detachment is the precise science Krishna unveils next in Chapter 3.